We are Anchor. Stay tuned for updated real news.
Hello Anchor Daily News viewers. Today we bring you new developments from the shadows of the war, which is becoming increasingly complex. The conflict between Russia and Ukraine continues not just on the front lines, but also in the war's shadowy theatre. In this war, sometimes the devastating effects of strategic moves are felt in unexpected places rather than directly on the front lines. We're now faced with such an example where Ukrainian saboteurs continue their critical operations unabated. The recent increase in sabotage activities, especially in Russian-occupied territories, has caused great concern for the Moscow administration. Every region infiltrated by saboteurs becomes a part of not only a military, but also a strategic and psychological war. Attacks on critical infrastructure controlled by Russia don't just undermine the occupation, but also aim to create chaos by catching Russia off guard. Most recently, Ukrainian resistance forces blew up an important bridge in Berdyansk. This bridge was seen as both a critical point on Russia's logistics line and as a strategic asset for the occupation administration in Berdyansk. The attack not only disrupted Russia's logistics flow, but also further increased the pressure on Russian forces in the region. Sabotage operations are just one of Ukraine's unconventional methods of fighting this war. These attacks challenge Russia not only physically, but also in its strategic planning. In particular, the targeting of bridges, ammunition depots, and railroad lines frustrate the logistical plans of the Russian army on the forward lines. Such operations erode Russia's capacity to wage war, while their psychological effects increase fear and uncertainty in the occupied territories. These attacks are gradually eroding Russia's military advantages and making Moscow's control of the region fragile. Will Russia be able to recover from the shock of these successive sabotage attacks? Or will Ukrainian resistance forces continue to change the course of the war through covert operations? Let's analyze the developments together. Before we get into our report, a quick reminder: the Anchor Daily News team is real. None of my team members or me are artificial intelligence. There's no doubt that AI is extremely advanced, but it's still not as good as us. By the way, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our daily reports and explanations. I do read all the comments you leave on our videos, so please continue to share your ideas about our content in the comments section. Tell us in the comments what content you'd like to see on the Anchor Daily News channel. And now let us begin if you're ready. Anchor Daily News reports. One of the invisible forces of the war between Ukraine and Russia continues its resistance and sabotage operations. Pro-Ukrainian saboteurs have targeted an important railroad bridge in the Russian-controlled city of Berdyansk, dealing a new blow to the occupying forces. This operation, in which Ukrainian military intelligence was also involved, shows once again that the war is not only being fought on the front lines, but is also being actively waged in the occupied territories. According to the main intelligence directorate of the Ukrainian Defense Ministry, saboteurs blew up the bridge in Berdyansk. The destruction of the bridge halted the flow of logistics in the region, disrupting Russia's strategic supply lines. In the footage circulating on social media, it's seen that the bridge targeted by the attack was located behind a car wash station and a public building in the city center. The bridge was known to be a critical part of the railroad lines carrying supplies to Russian forces in Berdyansk. After the explosion, on its Telegram account, the city's military administration said in a statement that the attack took place with a large explosion and the bridge was completely destroyed. Details are awaited, the first statement from the administration said. This attack in Berdyansk is expected to have serious implications on Russia's war plans. Ukrainian sources said the destruction of the bridge made it impossible for the occupying forces to supply fuel, weapons and ammunition. This railroad line was vital for providing logistical support to Russian military units in Berdyansk. Such operations by the GUR and pro-Kiev saboteurs in the occupied territories not only cause physical damage but also undermine Russia's war efforts and undermine Moscow's occupation strategy. Since the beginning of the war, Russian forces have suffered greatly from attacks on critical infrastructure. Targets such as bridges, railroads, ammunition depots and supply bases have been hit by Ukrainian saboteurs, leaving Moscow in a serious predicament. Such operations are aimed at disrupting Russia's logistical plans and throwing the order behind the front lines into disarray. At a time when Russia is stepping up offensives and trying to control large-scale operations, this sabotage in Berdyansk has created both an operational and a psychological blow to the occupying forces. It's observed that Ukraine has recently increased its sabotage operations. The attack in Berdyansk is considered as part of Ukraine's guerrilla warfare in the occupied territories. By targeting logistics lines and ammunition depots in Russian-held territories, Ukrainian forces aim to collapse the strategic structure behind the front lines. In particular, the sabotage of critical infrastructure disrupts the flow of supplies and ammunition that the Russian army needs on the front lines. Attacks in cities such as Berdyansk limit the mobility of Russian forces and directly affect frontline operations. Another impact of such operations is the devastating effect on Russia's war psychology. Moscow is experiencing both military and managerial difficulties as the war continues not only on the front lines but also in the territories it controls. The activities of pro-Ukrainian insurgents are creating an atmosphere of fear and insecurity in the occupied cities. While this environment created by sabotage operations negatively affects the morale of Russian soldiers, it also increases the resistance of the civilian population in the region against Russia. This bridge attack in Berdyansk is a critical signal for Russia. Ukraine aims to gain both military and strategic superiority with this attack. The sabotage of bridges and railway lines aims to turn the tide of the war in favor of Ukraine by dealing a heavy blow to the logistics lines of the Russian army. Following the sabotage in Berdyansk, it remains to be seen how Moscow will respond. Russia's vulnerability to such attacks may pave the way for future sabotage operations. In the light of recent developments, it appears that Ukraine is expanding its operations in the occupied territories. The attack in Berdyansk demonstrates the fragility of Russia's defensive line and shows how effective Ukraine's resistance strategy can be. While sabotage operations are expected to increase in the coming days, these attacks are expected to play a decisive role in the course of the war. What do you think? The bridge attack in Berdyansk is the latest indication that the war is becoming more complex and unpredictable. How does Russia plan to mitigate the impact of these attacks? How will Ukrainian saboteurs determine their next targets? Let us know in the comments. We read and care about your opinions.